What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Tyson. I'm the R3 fishing coordinator for the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. And this is another episode of Real Talk, Real Tips on the Oklahoma Outdoor Channel. Today, we're here with Taylor Tucker and Zack Smith, who's a wildlife technician from our Call Wildlife Management Area. And we'll be talking about white bass fishing. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves.
I'm Taylor Tucker, and I am a fisheries technician at Blue River.
My name is Zack Smith. I'm the wildlife technician on Caw and John Dahl WMAs.
Alrighty. So, Zack, can you kind of tell us a little bit about where Caw and that other WMA you mentioned are?
We're located in north central Oklahoma. It Caw's a big reservoir, and then we've got a little piece of prairie out there. That's at John Dahl. It's just three-quarter sections, but...
Awesome. All right. Next question. Can you kind of tell us who you are personally, what you do with the department, and kind of what you do for fun?
So I manage Caw WMA, and we do a lot of habitat management. We go to other areas and help them with habitat projects and that sort of thing. I'm a father. I've got a 2-year-old son at home, and we've got big plans to do a lot of fishing this spring. He's finally big enough to, cast a fishing pole a little bit. It's kind of dangerous. You've got to, keep your distance. Yeah. But
right.
He's having a lot of fun with it. So the
You got any other hobbies?
so I build Osage longbows.
Oh, that's right. I remember somebody telling me about that.
Yeah, I've done that for almost 15 years. I got into that at this event called OJAM, building bows. I do a lot of hunting and a lot of fishing with deer, turkey, upland game. I chase all those critters.
Yeah.
And then I fish. I fish for everything. We blue cat fishing from the bank, or your sand bass or crappie fishing, like this time of year.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's getting that time where need to start thinking about sand bass. So
yeah, definitely. I think with this recent rain we've had, that's kind of one of the first spring indicators of the white bass about to start running. You get water temps right around 55, 60 degrees, a nice spring rain, and then after that, I think is when it gets hot.
Yeah, the old timers always said when the red buds start blooming, it's time to go start checking the creek, especially after a recent rain.
Gotcha.
So how did you get into fishing for sand bass, and what's drawn you to it the most?
So when I was younger, growing up in school, my dad would take us. He had a little 16-foot aluminum boat, and he would take us. The closest lake to where I grew up was Kanawha Lake, and we'd go out there and fish for hybrids and sand bass. It didn't really have a lot of creeks that you can catch them running up the creek, but we were just fishing for them off the points and the inlets and outlets on that lake. And we caught some. We never just filled the boat full of them. But there in the lakes and stuff, a little bigger water, we'd use like a bladed bait. It's got treble hooks on it. It's just a little metal, kind of like a spoon. We'd fish with spoons some, and then my dad's favorite was always a rattle trap because it made noise and it flashed, in the water. So we'd use that a lot.
Real shad-like.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of, every time I go out, at least for sand bass, I'm always trying to find a lure that mimics a shad. Like that's one of their favorite things to eat and munch on, kind of. I know you mentioned, like, if you're on a lake that's not got like a creek bank a creek or like a river for those fish to run up. You're kind of targeting the points, the jetties, the riprap, anywhere that the shad are going to hang out.
Yeah, if there's any possibility for moving water, like on those power plant lakes, they'll pump water out of the river, and it creates a small current within the lake, and those fish, those shad will find it, and then those sand bass and hybrids and stuff will follow.
Gotcha.
Kind of school up there.
Which, yeah, because they like a little current when they're spawning and stuff too. So.
Yeah. Another good place, like in the summertime, is below a dam. They start letting water out of those lakes, and you catch it where they've done it a few days in a row. or they're on a schedule where they've done it a few times that week, and you can go below the dam and just really catch those fish. They run up and they hit the dam and they can't go anywhere else, and there's bait fish, and that's a really good area to target sand bass.
Yeah, it's almost like a staging area for them, whereas like the dam almost acts as like a natural barricade. So those bass are kind of just staged up in there, just eating. I mean, that's really all they can do is
basically follow the forage.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So, can you kind of go in a little bit of like your setup that you like to use?
So I've got a 7-foot, it's a cherry graphite spinning rod. I think it's either a light or a medium. It's probably a medium now because I went to flop a sand bass up on the bank and it was a pretty big one, and it broke the tip of the rod off. So I got to glue a new rod tip on there. Yeah. So it's a little shorter than 7 foot now, and then it just got I think it's a Fluger, spinning reel on it. Mm-hmm. But I like to use 6 to 8 pound tests, depending on if I'm gonna stop and fish for crappie a little bit, I might use 6 pound because it's a little more or less visible. But sometimes if there's cover or sticks or logs in the creek, I'll use 8 pound just in case I got to kind of pull them away from structure or something.
Right. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. You kind of you mentioned a little bit about your favorite lures. Are there different situations that you like to use certain lures for?
Yeah, if I'm fishing a creek, it seems like the cover and rocks and sticks and logs and stuff in a creek, it's never the same as it was last year. There's always been a flow or something that's moved things around.
Yeah.
So I use the cheapest bait I can starting out in a hole. You got runs and riffles, and I'll fish the holes, going down, and you'll find where the fish are. Sometimes they haven't made it all the way up because they get caught at a riffle, a bunch of rocks across the creek or something like that. And they'll run up till they hit that, and they'll kind of stage there till they get the next rainfall, and they'll move up further. So I just go hole to hole trying to find them.
So a lot of movement up and down the creek.
Yeah, walking the creek and, going down to a hole and then coming up and going to the next one.
Gotcha.
So I use the cheapest bait first because I don't want
that.
I don't want to lose a $6 rattle trap or whatever they are now, the $6-8.
Jump onto like Temu and get you some Temu baits.
Yeah,
stock up.
Yeah, but I'll just use a little jig head and like a little 2-inch or 2.5-inch like a shad bait or a curly tail jig, and I'll use all different colors. Sand bass are not picky. You can use chartreuse, or you can use, like with the sassy shad, you can use, silver or white or whatever. But I'll just start with that, and either depending on the water, if there's a lot of flow, I'll use a heavier weight because I want that to sink, down into the hole where the fish probably are.
Right.
And that way the current doesn't take it. And you get your bait deeper as the current's taking it down. Have a good chance to catch one. But so a lot of current, I use a heavier weight and maybe a little bigger bait, depending on the current and stuff. And then if it's just a shallow, slow moving hole, you can use a 16th ounce jig head and a curly tail, or there's other kinds of baits. I just like something with some movement to it.
Right.
Seems like it triggers a strike a little better.
Kind of get their attention a little bit more.
Yeah, and if that's not working, I'll go to a bladed bait, like a rooster tail. You can put a curly tail jig on a root. It's just a jig head with a little blade on it. Mm-hmm. I'll go to that, and if that's not working, I'll go to like an inline spinner. Yeah. Like a Meps or a rooster tail or something, and try 2 or 3 different sizes of that. And then if you haven't caught it on all that stuff, the odds are they're probably not in that hole. You can just move down the creek until you get.
So are you trying like all of these at each hole and then moving on up?
Sometimes. It depends on the depth and stuff. If I'm pretty confident there's not any fish in there, I won't go through all of those. But sometimes I'll take 2 poles and have a jig head on one and a spinner or something on the other. Right. And then you can, you don't have to spend time tying different lures on and off. But
yeah. You just kind of go in, fan cast each one at each hole, and if they're there, they're there. If not, just move to the next one. There's no point in wasting, a half hour on one hole that odds are, if you haven't caught them on something, with how aggressive sand bass are, they're Probably just not in that hole.
You normally know pretty quick.
Right. Right. So can you kind of give us your best story or the biggest sandy you've ever caught?
I've caught one that was, I don't know, close to 2.5 pounds. A big old female. But my favorite story is my brother came up and I haven't been to the creek and checked it all year, and I just went out there to check it out, and we pull up to the parking lot and we walk into the creek just right by the truck, and we look down in the water, and you could just see them. They were just flopping in the riffle, trying to run up through the riffle, and you could just see hundreds of them.
That's a good indicator.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, so we turn around, grab our poles real quick, and we run down there. And I've never caught fish until I was physically sore. Like it was like you almost couldn't reel a fish in,
Right.
And it was unbelievable. But we kept, I don't know, 20 or 30 a piece, but
That's awesome.
we caught hundreds. I mean, it was incredible.
That's like every fisherman's dream.
That is,
walking up on like a pool and just being like,
yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'd never seen anything like it. It was really cool.
That's awesome.
So when you're fishing from the bank, how do you look for good areas? I mean, other than just sitting there seeing them. Like
Other
you
than just
did,
walking
but
up to the hole and like there just being hundreds of fish there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of scout the creek or something before the water comes up and goes down. Mm-hmm. And you kind of, just from being in an area, walking around, you can kind of know where the holes are and how deep they are. Mm-hmm. But I get out in January, February, and just look around, kind of see what the water's doing, see if there's already water in the creek and it just needs a little bit of runoff, or if it may need a little more than that. Mm-hmm. But I'll get out there and kind of see what the creek looks like and see where the holes are when I'm scouting a new place to fish. And then when you do get those rains and stuff, you know about how far down the creek you need to be,
right,
to possibly do some good. The problem with a lot of these lakes, like Cough, for instance, and a lot of Corps of Engineer lakes, the upper end of the lake's kind of getting silted in. So in the wintertime, the creek may not be connected, or it may be really shallow connected to the creek itself. So you just need to know what lake level you might need for the water to actually flow over that really shallow spot and get enough water where the fish can run up the creek.
Gotcha.
So is there any like specific weather conditions that you kind of have noticed, just kind of get it started, you know?
Yeah. So we got to have that flow in the water. I don't know what flow rate they need, but I know after a 2 or 3 inch rain, typically that's enough. If it's already kind of rained once, in the spring, a 2 or 3 inch rain is typically enough, or 2 or 3 inches in a weekend or something is typically enough to get enough flow that they'll run up a creek.
Right.
So our massive rain event this
week
has done some good, probably.
It should be perfect.
I feel bad for anybody that's going to watch this like next year and they're like, man, we're just waiting on it to rain.
I know.
Because currently, I mean, hopefully, I'm about to go out this afternoon and try to get on some, and then talking about going out this weekend, getting out the kayaks.
Yeah.
So do you see, like, what are some advantages, like, for you that a kayak gets that you can't get maybe from fishing from the bank?
The biggest advantage I know is you don't have to carry all those fish back to the truck. You can just paddle to the boat ramp and then just load them into your pickup.
Huge advantage.
Yeah. No, I like using the kayak, especially for sand bass. I'll use the kayak sometimes to gain access up there, to some of those spots. It's a little easier on your fishing rods and stuff when you're not walking through the woods and hanging up line and different things. Sure. But
a lot of those areas too are tend to be kind of private. Like that might not be public access to get back up in there, but if you're on the water on a navigable piece of like stream or river or creek, you're perfectly legal to be up in there. You just can't step out of that kayak or boat or whatever you're in. What's like your favorite thing about fishing from a kayak?
When this time of year, when the water's still pretty cold, you don't have to get cold and wet. You can sometimes the creeks I like to fish, a lot of times they'll have they're both steep banks,
Yeah.
but you'll have a sandbar. Once the water goes down, a lot of times you'll have a little rocky sandbar on the bend. It'll be on the inside of a bend or something. And on this bend, it'll be on this side of the creek, but on the other bend, it'll be on the other side.
Right.
So if you're walking the bank, you kind of have to pick a side unless there's a shallow spot where you can, wade through. So you can go from spot to spot. I normally just beach the kayak and get out and fish this hole and then go to the next one. And you can go through, as opposed to a boat. The other thing is you can go through places that are too shallow to take a boat. So you can get up past where the boats can get a little ways with the kayak sometimes.
So do you have any suggestions for someone that's just starting out and wanting to catch sand bass?
It's really not too. You don't need a fancy pole or any of that stuff to do it, and just some jig heads and some swim baits or some just some small jigs and curly tails. It's pretty inexpensive to get started with, and just go see if you can find a creek that's local to you, or make a road trip and make a weekend of it, and go try something new.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really fun to take kids that have never experienced that, and they get to catch all those fish, and they're not picky, so they on different things. It's a really good thing to go take your kids and just have a weekend, make some memories.
Yeah, for sure.
That would be a fun road trip.
One cool thing, kind of regulation wise, about white bass is there's no size limit, and there's no limit on the number of white bass you can catch in a day. So it's kind of just like they reproduce in the millions. Like I think one female can lay 2 to 3 million eggs. Correct me if I'm wrong. But like that's just, imagine being able to go out and have a day like you did, just like with your kids, being able to catch just fish after fish after fish. And like you mentioned, they're not super picky. They could really care less about the color most of the time. I mean, you kind of lean towards the shad-like stuff, but I mean, most likely you're probably going to catch a fish if they're there.
What was that you were saying earlier? 1.5 million pounds annually?
So in some of our creel surveys and other things through the department, we have determined that Oklahoma anglers catch and harvest annually around 1.5 million pounds of white bass a year.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah, like if that just tells you.
And there's still no limit on them, so that just tells you how well they reproduce.
Right, they do reproduce incredibly well. I mean, even like Lake Hefner and Lake Overholser here in the city have been really heating up lately. I know guys go in there off the riprap throwing like white swim baits. I mean, really anything white, silver, shad-like has just been getting eaten up on the northwest side of those.
Now, in the summer, they're more of a pelagic fish, schooling in like the deeper waters. So I think it is kind of important to talk about distinguishing them between hybrids and stripers.
Yeah,
which
for
the easiest way to do that is if you look at their tooth patches on their tongue. Stripers and hybrids will have 2 tooth patches, while a white bass only has 1. It's the easiest way, because I feel like looking just at the lines, if they're broken, unbroken, dark, or faint, that can be tricky. So I would look at the tooth patches.
Like, say someone is unable to tell the difference. Can you kind of explain the lines that you just mentioned?
So striper will have darker lines, and they also don't have the distinct hump that a white bass has.
Right.
Where a hybrid will have kind of broken lower lines normally, and like a moderate hump, while the white bass has a distinct hump or arched back, and their lines are a little bit fainter lower. But see, that's all like degrees.
It's
it can be
hard to tell.
Yeah. The tooth patch is what I would say is the best way to distinguish between them, especially whenever you run into small striper and stuff like that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's a great way to bring us to our end. So this is the end of this episode on Real Talk, Real Tips, brought to you by the Oklahoma Outdoor Channel and the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. Zack, thanks for joining us today. We sure enjoyed it, and hope that you can get on the the white bass this weekend.
I hope so.
He's about it.
We'll
Alrighty.
see.
Well, don't forget to follow us on all of our other social media platforms, and we will catch y'all next time.